Welcome to the fourth episode of A More Delightful Future, where you hear conversations about how to design a better society. I'm your host, Elijah Claude, and today you'll hear from Jordan Higgins, an immersive experience designer. I had the pleasure of making his acquaintance as a guest speaker during my boot camp, where he helped to inspire me to use my experience and passion for virtual reality to guide my design interests. Jordan serves as the president of the UXVA DC chapter in Virginia, a community organizer for DC UX, and an instructor of design at George Mason University. He enjoys putting on AR/VR conferences and has been applying human-centered design principles to emergent technology and government innovation for decades. Without further ado, let's see how Jordan is building a more delightful future. All right. So to start with our very first question, Jordan, thanks again for coming. So my question to start is, what I start every episode with is, in your experience and your opinion, what does it mean for design to be delightful?
To be delightful. So one of the things that, when we first started, working with the Microsoft HoloLens, we had the opportunity to go out and do some specialized training from their designers and engineers. And they taught us about this concept of magic moments, where they go for when you kind of forget about the fact that you're wearing a headset on your head and you're just kind of caught up in that one moment in the experience. It may not necessarily be delightful, but I think like when I hear delightful, that's the first thing that pops into my head. Those moments put on a HoloLens, and I was kind of going through a demo, and then all of a sudden, bam, the world changes, and I'm standing on the surface of Mars, and the Curiosity rover is like right next to me. Like, that's delightful, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a huge impact. Those are the kind of moments that I think when we think about any digital experience, we try to as a goal, we try to go for those moments where you kind of forget about the technology that you're using, and you're either, whether you're on the surface of Mars, or you're paying your taxes, or whatever, anywhere in between, you're right there in the moment doing what you need to do, or you're completely surprised by something unexpected.
Yeah, that's awesome. At the arcade, we called that wow moments, when people put on the headset and they just like, wow, they just look around just completely amazed with everything. So I
Yeah.
definitely understand what you're saying there. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. All right, question number two. How do you design inclusive experiences?
So that's a great question, and it's especially challenging, when we're dealing with the emerging technology, where some of the things haven't necessarily been solved or even identified yet. So we kind of start with sort of trying to develop a deep understanding of just what some of the barriers to inclusion can be, with whatever the platform is, whether it's headset VR, or mobile augmented reality. Right off the bat, that can bring in some aspects that are not necessarily inclusive, right? Just access to the technology can be a big one. It's come down a lot in price, which has helped with access, but still, $400 for even an Oculus Quest is a significant barrier for people. Um, and then there's accessibility challenges, where how do you make the most of a immersive experience, um, while you potentially don't have a visual sense, and that sometimes means like, well, where do we have opportunities to make things more inclusive? Can we make better use of spatial audio that could stand on its own as an experience? There's some people out there doing excellent work with accessibility in the immersive space. Regine Gilbert in particular is one UX designer I know that is very focused on accessibility and applying it to immersive. Uh, there's some really exciting stuff, like even just identifying the questions and challenges to be thinking about now, and then finding those opportunities. So, and
Right.
I think one thing that's exciting about WebXR as an emerging medium for immersive experiences is that brings in a lot of the accessibility and inclusion properties that are built into web standards, means that there's opportunities to think about how we can apply those to immersive experiences as well. And I think we're seeing like really exciting stuff from companies like Facebook, Magic Leap, Microsoft. That all of them have very strong commitments to accessibility and usability and inclusion that we're seeing show up in their products and their developer documentation, which is also helping us, one, understand the right questions to ask, during the design phase, so that we can make more accessible and inclusive experiences.
Right, definitely. Um, so that sounds like basically using, the standards that are there today, as well as, kind of piggybacking off of these bigger companies that are able to spend a lot of time and money, doing that sort of research. Yeah, it definitely sounds like a good strategy for everything as well. One thing I am personally interested in is in regards to inclusion is the ability to think about different cultures, and how they interact with technology. So in your experience, when you're, working with these different agencies or just playing around with the technology, have you seen or have you thought about incorporating different cultures? So for instance, Eastern cultures have a completely different way of kind of language and looking at how to use this technology. Even in America, we have, different communities that are used to different ways of interacting with technology and stuff like that. So how do you consider that?
I would say often, sometimes early on, it's, I think the biggest challenge is just finding the right use case for the technology, right? Like one of the first things we do with any project is just kind of ask the question, well, why is this better in VR?
Mhm.
Like why, or why is this better in mobile? Why shouldn't this be a website or, what? And then once we've kind of determined that that is the right platform, then we can kind of get into the, like, where are there maybe, different variations of culture? I think in terms of specific examples, I'm trying to think of a project that we've worked on where that's come up. And most of what we've done has been really more focused on like data visualization and training applications for a very specific application. But it's making me think of a friend of mine, a guy named Sean Macbeth, who's working at Diplomatic Language Services, where they do language training, and it's specifically designed to help people learn languages quickly. And the things that really strike me about it is they're doing like 360 tours where you go in and can actually hear the language from the people and in the environment with the all the like audio cues. One of the things that struck me about that experience is that it's really, it's one thing to watch a video or to listen to an audio tape, uh, but it makes me actually kind of really miss travel and sort of the ability to go to other
Yeah,
places where you can learn the mechanics of a language, and you can even learn, you can read like, well, in this culture this is a common greeting, or don't say this because that may be misinterpreted because of things like that that you can read about. It's a whole nother when you have that sense of being there, or when you have that sense of combining what you're hearing with what you're seeing, and with interacting with a person who's at scale, like they're standing there in the same room with you, or
yeah,
observing an interaction. Your brain will process that more naturally, and it's more likely to make an impact, or be memorable. There's really interesting work going on with like sensitivity training type of things too. Like, I remember one presentation at the University of Maryland about how they were using it for police training, and for helping people recognize biases that they may have and not realize it, based on their interactions with people or how they respond to a different situation. I think it's a challenging field to work in, because how do you maintain authenticity and not
yeah,
also be triggering for things that could be really traumatic? Being able to experience how I might perceive an interaction could be very different than how someone else would perceive an interaction, and the behavior of the way that it would be directed to me could be very different for me than it would be for someone else. And if I were to go in and experience, that interaction, in with a different tone, with a different, posture, with a different, all sorts of things that come into play, that can be a really shaking, and like a lot of work that I think early on there was a lot of interesting work being done just in helping people understand and not be affected by cognitive biases. I think this takes that to a whole nother level. And, it's not just understanding and recognizing the bias when it occurs, but it's actually developing that visceral response to it too, where you really can feel it and better understand the implications of it.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I love that you putting down those names and resources. I'll definitely look those up and put those in the show notes. That's super awesome right there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
All right. Next question is, what can we do to be better UX professionals and teammates, especially at agile tech companies, for instance?
Um, wow, that's another really really good question, and it's a good one to be thinking about. In my experience, there's always been sort of a tension between agile delivery and UX. And I think at U Group we've done some really good work trying to understand that tension, and to really try to balance out, what I would say UX and design need to deliver in an agile environment. Um, it usually boils down to something along the lines of like, well, we need some lead time to understand the problem and to develop some solutions, and then get into a pattern of iterative testing and prototyping. And often project realities can be, well, that's all great. We love it. We love the insights that we find from it, but we've got to do it quickly, quickly, quickly. And we've got, maybe limited time or budget to do that. There's sometimes, I would say, when planning a project, there's what, we would like to do, and then there's what we have the time to do. So that led to us kind of, I think through a lot of trial and error, I'll say, the good enough solution to give us, it's better to get some of the insights that we need than none of the insights that we need. So, I can think of one good example on a particularly time constrained and resource constrained project. There wasn't a lot of research that was available before we had to start getting into things like persona development. And we found that actually empathy mapping, makes for a really good collaborative exercise with stakeholders, including clients and developers, to kind of put them automatically, like right from the bat, into a human-centered, who is this person that we're designing for mentality that we would use to then make like proto personas, which, you know, may not be as fully fleshed out as like a full persona that's kind of, been extensively researched and validated with multiple representatives. But it is the, in sort of an agile environment, that can be the like, okay, I've got the high points of what I think I need to know about this person to think about it from their perspective and not mine.
Right.
So I think that's one example, but it's finding those opportunities to make sure that you're not compromising the human-centered process in the interest of agile delivery, trying to find ways to deliver insights faster, um, while still making sure that we are, validating prototypes and challenging assumptions and things like that.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So how do you, I guess, how do you make that trade-off? Like, how do you determine, hey, this is, if we cut this off, this is going to really destroy the human-centered design approach. But if we make this certain design decision, it's a good compromise. How do you make that sort of trade-off?
Sometimes it's just making a really impassioned plea. There's really no better argument to make, though, than showing results or showing measurable value. So, if there isn't any sort of previous example to draw on, then you kind of have to do a little bit of the like, okay, trust me on this. We'll debrief after and we'll see what we learned from it. Um, but it gets even better once somebody's actually seen that for the first time. So if we can actually see where, okay, so we tested this really quick, even though it was just a quick 5-minute hallway test, right? We identified that there's a major usability problem here that, now this ticket that you had slotted for development,
Hmm.
you're not going to expend that time now and then have to, fix it in a future sprint. Like once you actually start to see that, then you're, getting buy-in on it is much less of a challenge. So it's definitely keeping an eye out, especially in like a UX lead or your what, actually whatever role you're in, it's kind of constantly looking for those opportunities to show something measurable. And then when they happen, make sure they're communicated back to the team, because often people in other roles are going to be very focused on what is the fire that we're putting out today, and may not recognize the value that this process or this tool or this technique has brought.
Right.
Highlighting that, you'll likely gain some credibility with being able to kind of say, well, like listen, remember when we tested that and it saved us 2 weeks worth of work on something that wouldn't, that wasn't the right solution. Same thing here. You're more likely to get get by in there. I'd like to say that that works 100% of the time. Sometimes there's circumstances or there's other factors that will outweigh that, but
Right.
there's no better argument than measurable value.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. That's something I hear from other folks too. So it's just great to hear that, reflected here and your experience as well. Definitely just show results, show measurable outcomes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Show results and communicate them in the right way at the right time. like
Right.
like timing goes for a lot there too.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the next question is, how do you design for emergent technology? Considering that it is very new, most likely solving new problems, but probably just solving the same problems in a different way. So how do you, put in the human-centered design process in that?
So a lot of the tools that we use in sort of our traditional design process, apply naturally to emerging technologies. So, think about the HoloLens, for example. It starts the same way a lot of our stuff starts. We do post-it slams and we do storyboard development and we think, customer journey. But in this case, we're now adding, I think the exciting part for designers is that, we're really no longer constrained to a laptop or a mobile phone screen. We have the whole world now as a canvas. So, first of all, we kind of storyboard out how we think that will work. And then we do a lot of physical prototyping in the environment. So we'll prototype at scale using sort of low fidelity. So where we would traditionally do low fidelity wireframes or screen flows or things like that, we take that into the real world. We use like Legos or cardboard, arts and crafts materials to craft things that would simulate 3D objects or things in the environment. Shell Games has a great article on this about they
Yeah,
call
brown
this
boxing.
technique brown box. Yeah,
I love that.
it's huge, and especially when you're dealing with 3D and game engine development, where this stuff gets very expensive. Working that stuff out, one, it's a great activity for just getting out of that. A lot of my early HoloLens concepts looked like mobile applications that were just floating in space, right? Because it takes some time to get out of that 2D mindset. Microsoft calls it body storming, which is also a great way to think about it. So, so just brainstorming, it's like you're, storming, the whole body, and like, you get a sense of how far away like is too far to reach for that holographic control, or how close can something be before it's uncomfortable. Like, all these sort of human factors that we didn't really have to think of before, because again, it was all locked to that one device that we had total control of our relationship to it. Now we're looking at creating 3D content that's anchored to the world around us and shares the space with us, and that opens up a whole nother realm of consideration. So that physical prototyping and brainstorming step is key. And then after that, getting into device as soon as possible. So it's why like platforms like Google Cardboard were actually so exciting to us. Like it never really hit mainstream adoption because just the whole experience of putting your phone into a headset and putting it on is very, it's not the most intuitive or comfortable thing in the world. But for people who had a smartphone and could get a cardboard, you could get them free sometimes just by going to a conference.
Yeah.
That gave you something that you could put on, and you could build a quick prototype in Unity and put it in device and kind of see, wow, like I just made a world. Even if that world's just like one bouncing ball on a big green plane, like that's still a cool experience. And I think one exciting thing for designers now is that the tools to develop, virtual and augmented reality content have become are so much more accessible. There's free tools like Microsoft Maquette, which Microsoft developed as an internal prototyping tool, for them to own it. It's on Steam. The people that build it are very active on the forums there. There's Gravity Sketch and other 3D design tools. So we can actually, we're seeing tools now where we can actually design 3D experiences in 3D, which is also really, exciting.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's one thing to take your 2D content, to develop a model on your desktop or laptop, export it, bring it in, and then kind of go into the device. It's a whole nother when you're actually creating. I mean, you feel like you have magical powers. You are just creating, like a sorcerer. You're like just creating worlds around you, which is a pretty cool feeling as a designer.
Yeah, that is incredible. That's something I really want to get to myself one day. All
Yeah.
right. Almost done here. Next question, next to last, is what are you looking for when you're hiring UX professionals, especially on the entry level position?
That's another great question. I think, you definitely are looking for things like the design process. You're looking for a strong portfolio. You're looking for evidence of, understanding a problem and designing a solution for it. It's especially challenging in the immersive space because some of the stuff that people who are new to this they're figuring out the same stuff that we are, even though 4 years of experience designing for HoloLens is still, in the grand scheme of things, not a whole lot of experience. Um, so one of the other things we look for is that we tend to, in the process part of it, I look a lot for like facilitation experience. In my own like interview process, I got rid of the idea of like doing like at-home design challenges in favor of kind of doing in-person facilitation challenges, because I'm more looking like, can you take these sort of, design principles or UX methods, and then, drop into a team and help them come to, given a problem space, help them come up with insights to contribute to the solution. That can be a tough one because, you may not have a lot of facilitation experience going into it. But it's definitely a skill that I recommend people try to build up early on, because it's, whatever level you're at, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And then I think nowadays I also look for some experience with 3D. That's not absolutely essential, yet necessarily. I guess it depends on the role. I guess it would be a better way to put that. But I think that as this, especially with mobile phones being as prevalent as they are now, and WebXR taking the way that it is, we're starting to see the most breakthrough adoption with web augmented reality on mobile devices.
Yeah.
And that's going to mean some, understanding of 3D design to the same level that we have of 2D design.
Right. Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Great insights as always, definitely. So the last question, which you kind of, already went to throughout the interview, but gonna go ahead and ask it is, how do you invent magic?
Wow. I just gave a presentation on this on called The Magic of Mobile Web AR. And we're getting ready to deliver a mobile augmented reality game in which you take an everyday object and then scanning it with your phone, it comes to life. I think especially right now, as this stuff is so new, it's a really good opportunity to look at experience or look at things and then kind of think like, well, if we don't have the traditional limitations and physical constraints of the real world, what would be cool to do with it? And then how do we do that? Growing up, one of my favorite superheroes was Green Lantern. Because I
I love
always
them. Yeah.
loved, yeah, I love this idea that you could like think about something and then bam, it's right there. And we're pretty close to, emotive and like, some of the brain computer interface stuff that's coming out. It's not too far off. It's actually on the horizon, where you could imagine like, thinking of like a jet plane and then one like materializes in front of you. Like,
Yeah, it's
um,
incredible.
yeah. So we definitely can look for like inspiration from things like science fiction and stuff like that. The thing that we look for now, especially sort of at this point in time, is where can we take something ordinary and, make it do something completely unexpected.
Right, right. That's awesome. That's exactly what what I want to do too, man. That's incredible. Thank you so much, once again for doing this podcast. And you had some really great answers. Is there anything else you want to add or say before we end the episode?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for asking me to come on. It's a pleasure to talk with you, as always. And yeah, I think this is a really exciting time for people to start exploring spatial computing.
Yeah,
Whether it's augmented reality, virtual reality. Um, it feels a lot to me like back when, sort of the first iPhones came out and mobile websites became a thing. We saw this sort of fundamental shift in computing from um, you know, being locked to sort of desktop experiences to now having websites that were accessible wherever and whenever we happen to be. This feels a lot like then, and it actually feels like it's happening a lot faster. If you've even got sort of a passing interest in this stuff, I cannot recommend getting started with spatial computing enough, and looking at the WebXR things in particular. There's frameworks like A-Frame. There's open source design tools like Blender for developing 3D models. There's online repositories of 3D content like Sketchfab. With modern Android, like I think the Samsung and the new iPhones both have like LiDAR capability to scan 3D models on the go. This stuff, it's just happening so fast, and there's a lot of opportunity for designers to help explore and really chart the way we go with that. And to bring it back to accessibility and inclusion, a lot of opportunity to even identify what questions we need to be asking. Like it's going to be some exciting stuff.
that was Jordan Higgins from George Mason University. You can reach him on LinkedIn or on Twitter @jhiggins. If XR stuff interests you at all, be sure to take Jordan's advice and go experiment with designing for immersive experiences and spatial computing. Thanks again for listening. Jordan is building a more delightful future. Are you?